Now you get to be HOA president. 2-parent malicious compliance, posted by I Want a Secret Garden. Long but worth it. About 25 years ago, my parents built their dream house. Although the house is now in the middle of a large metroplex, when they built it, it was in the fringes of countryside with rapid development over 2 decades. When they bought the lot, they were the first to purchase from the developer. The developer sold to 3 original neighbors, my parents and 2 others, all at the end of the cul-de-sac in a row. The other streets in this plat also became a large subdivision with a fancy name that would come to bear a lot of prestige. But that meant being part of an HOA. They didn't want that. The developer wouldn't sell them the land without an HOA. If you aren't a part of the community, you'll need to form your own HOA and get it approved. So my dad, with a beatific grin, said he would be the HOA president of our single suburban street. He and the 2 neighbors drafted the bylaws of their own HOA in strict accordance with the planned neighborhood. But they added a special provision that the president of the HOA could name a successor instead of having the street vote on one. Absent a majority rejection, the successor would be the president, essentially trying to avoid terms in campaigning while still offering folks a way to dispute the HOA president, important for later. So, in the winter of 1994, my father very seriously took the thick black CD binder full of laminated and hole-punched instructions and the pages on how to be a good HOA president and put that binder in the very back of a cabinet and forgot about it for the next 16 years. The homeowners of our street were not asked to pay an annual fee, and the HOA didn't police number of cars, color front doors, or any other ridiculous standards HOAs enforce. As it was a quiet cul-de-sac, no one did anything more egregious than the occasional reckless teenager. Then, a new family built the house across from us. It consisted of 2 children, a husband, and a stay-at-home mom we'll call Gladys, Kravitz for the Bewitched fans. Now Gladys was a real busybody. She would stand at the front windows of her house to watch and patrol which cars were using the cul-de-sac to turn around, when houses down the street held events and parties, and were using the front of her house to park for literally a night, and sending noise complaints to the police about barking dogs, her other neighbor's kids, there were 6 in a blended family, the other neighbor's cars, they were collectors not even repairing cars, and other ridiculously petty things. She didn't have a job, so safety patrol became her whole identity. She would always hurry over to gossip whenever my mom was taking out the trash cans to the curb. Sadly, my dad contracted a neuromuscular disease in 2005. It got bad quickly and he was confined to a wheelchair. I learned to drive for my hardship license in a handicap van, and we had more than the usual number of cars due to the round-the-clock caregivers in the later years. Gladys decided it was time to offer help to my poor mother, who was slaving absurd hours just to keep creditors at bay. Gladys very sweetly approached, expressed her sympathies for our struggles, pointed out the number of cars in our driveway, and generously, so generously, offered to take over the president of the HOA duties if my father would name her successor. After being hounded the 6th or 7th time, and Gladys hinting that if my mom was struggling so much, maybe she could send my dad to hospice and move houses to something more suited. In fact, Gladys's best friend was looking for a house and would love to live across the street and buy our house. My mom frickin' snapped. She basically told Gladys to stop asking and that her husband was dying, and it was incredibly insensitive and rude to offer to kick us out of our neighborhood and to take over just because she wanted clout to annoy the neighbors about letting kids play basketball after 6 p.m. Gladys responded nastily that my dad would have to name a successor because when he died, soon, the HOA presidency would revert back for election. Okay then, Gladys, you're absolutely right. My dad should name someone the HOA president as his successor after his 16-year reign. Malicious compliance activated. After my dad died, my mom found out that she was named as the next HOA president in my dad's will. Dad never said anything about it while he was alive, but his rumor was always understated. Gladys was apoplectic. She tried to overturn the successor claim and run against my mom, but nobody else on the street contested the choice. No one, all new neighbors after 20 years, even knew we had a special single street HOA. And for another 9 years, my mom did absolutely nothing as HOA president. My mom had to sell the home in 2019 very unwillingly, as it was the house my parents built together. But with the development of the city, property taxes had risen too high and priced her out. I took a week off work to fly out and help her pack, and while packing up the house, we found my dad's OG 1994 HOA binder, bylaws and all. And of course, Mom had to name an HOA successor. So this time, she did comply. The malicious part was more against everyone else. Very ceremoniously, not, my mom finally named Gladys the president of the HOA and gave her the binder, which apparently has long since been digitized and something Gladys has been reading for fun in preparation of this moment. Apparently, Gladys went rabid with the power as her kids had gone off to college and promptly charged everyone on the street $100 a month towards neighborhood incidentals, supposedly for mowing the strip that people just mowed themselves, and a highly encouraged neighborhood barbecue one Saturday a month to address the neighborhood concerns. She also outlawed basketball hoops in driveways, dictated no cars could be parked on the street or in driveways, but only in garages. Things like landscaping and holiday decor approval and other inane absurd power trips. My mom kept her Nextdoor app open and watched Gladys go down in flames. 3 separate households moved and dropped long hate-filled call-out posts about Gladys, making their lives a misery until they couldn't stand it anymore. That's 3 of 12 houses, by the way. Yeah, Gladys wrecked a single-street HOA with a quarter loss. Gladys got everything she wanted. My dad to name an HOA successor, my mom to name an HOA successor, for us to move away, and for her to finally be HOA president. And now everyone absolutely hates her, and no one will pay her $100 to go to her barbecues. And before my mom finally deleted the street from her next door, it seems that the rest of the street had voted to hold an election for a new HOA president. Her tenure lasted 6 months. Gladys doesn't understand why people talk so fondly about my parents as the most ideal HOA presidents, since they never did a thing. My mom is 2 years into her new home and does not miss the neighborhood anymore at all. Okay, so everyone is super mad at my mom for ruining many lives like Syndrome from The Incredibles. Let me explain how the handoff/nomination went. Holy crap, Secret Garden, the moving truck is coming in 1 hour and we still haven't cleaned out all the shelves in the study. What do we do? Just start throwing crap in boxes, Mom. And here's a trash bag for old cords and papers. Oh my word, your father's old HOA binder. Toss it. No, we can't. I think this is supposed to be kept by the city or something. Mom, we don't have time. We can mail it to the city or something. Hun, run it over to Gladys. Mom, are you sure? She's always been bugging me about it. She can keep it. Now run. I then literally tear downstairs, race across the street, ring the doorbell, shove the binder into Gladys's hands with a "my mom says this is yours now, bye," and then race back to find out that the Christmas decorations were still in a forgotten cabinet and need to be thrown into a trash bag. Literally zero premeditation and 100% aggravated meltdowns about moving. I cannot stress how much my mom did not want to move. I took out a lot of the emotional parts originally in the draft as not necessary or limiting the word count. My dad built her that house. The first night in the new house, she, as a 58-year-old woman, cried until 4 a.m. begging to go home. She loved our neighborhood, our street, and our house. She did not try to ruin her neighbors' lives. We didn't know anyone left on the street by that point anyway. They'd all been priced out or moved too, except for Gladys. The end line is kind of a throwaway, saying my mom is doing much better now and she doesn't miss Gladys at all. I do feel bad for all those folks driven out by Gladys's dumb rules, but I'm also going to say that the high property taxes probably didn't help. If I ever won the lottery, the first thing I would do would be buy our house back, put it in a trust, and let my mom live there for the rest of her life. Anyway, to the commenter saying my dad was a freaking legend, he absolutely was. Taking down Queen Karen, president of the HOA, posted by California Oldtimer. Okay, this happened years ago, 1985 to be exact. I was 45 when this happened and I'm 81 now. So after my second retirement, I started doing property management. I bought this 2,500 square foot luxury home in with the sole intention of renting it out. Now I didn't know how bad the HOA was, but when I became the owner, I soon found out. This all took place in 2 years' time. Karen would literally have a problem with everyone in the neighborhood. Trash cans left out? Fined. Loud music after 10 p.m.? Fined. Yard sale without permission? Fine. Removing dead plants and replanting without approval? You get fined. It went on and on like this. Now, the community could run for the HOA board, but the HOA board chose the president. 6 out of the 10 members on the board liked Karen, so she always kept her job. Her husband was in the medical field, so he made a lot of money. It got to the point where she was called Queen Karen in the neighborhood and her dishing out HOA fines. Now, I used to go in person to collect the rent because the people that rented my house were good friends of mine. I did this for months, so I would park my car by the front of the garage. I and my friends were having some music on, but it wasn't that loud. Queen Karen came over, driving her golf cart, and said, "Excuse me." "Yeah," I replied. "You have to turn that music down. It's too loud." I told her that it was 8 p.m. and that music that's even loud can be played until 10. She wasn't having it and demanded that I do so. Now, my friends and I kept the music going and we were enjoying ourselves. She proceeded to get angry and fine me. Now, most people would just take the abuse and pay the fine, but not me. I went to the HOA board, I contested that fine, and I won. From that point on, Queen Karen made it her personal mission to destroy me. She would be and fuss about every little thing. I fought what I could, but I did end up paying for some of it. She also went after my tenants, which made things worse for me. So I had to sit down with my friends one night to discuss the problem. When I parked my car, Queen Karen came over in her robe and said I have to park somewhere else. I did because I didn't want to start anything. So we see her go back into her house and embrace a man that isn't her husband. We were being nosy, and we came to the conclusion that she was cheating on her husband. Spoiler alert, she was. So my friends and I told Queen Karen's husband. I'm sure he did some investigation because 3 months later they divorced and he was moving his stuff out. Now, gossip said that Queen Karen got nothing because she was the one that cheated and she didn't have a job, so she wasn't entitled to the money. From this point on, Queen Karen had a massive decline in the quality of life that she had. She sold her car and got a cheaper one, and she adopted different dressing habits. But even after the divorce, she never got a job and she was still living somewhat better than everyone else. Fast forward to 1986 in February. Queen Karen and the HOA had been giving out fines for very obscure things and increasing monthly dues. Having trash cans out a couple of hours early or after the trash man left would result in a fine. Targeting people that had older or dirty cars, and it just goes on and on. Me and the other people, the community, were sick of the crap that she and the HOA were pulling. So at the next meeting, we made our voices our concerns. Queen Karen said that the community had been falling behind on repairs and that the dues and increase in fines were necessary, especially if people weren't maintaining their own property. She said that it was in the yearly budget report and that we should have read it. The other ticked off residents and I go and read the statement. Now, none of us read it because we take it as a junk mail and disregard it. But we read the whole statement, cover to cover. Queen Karen had increased the HOA budget 15%, and where that extra money was going remained unknown. So we went over to her house the next day, and we demanded to know where the extra money was being spent, but she refused several times. We closed the door and went back to watching TV. We're filing a joint lawsuit to find out where the money was going, and in June, we found out. Cue the revenge. Queen Karen was living off HOA fines and dues. The increase is because she was running out of money. She still didn't have a job, so she embezzled from the HOA so she wouldn't have to get a job. She gets busted. We call the police for her embezzling the money, and she was charged with fraud and extortion. The neighbors and I filed a joint lawsuit against Karen to get reimbursement as well. Because she had no money, she had to mortgage her house to pay us all. She later went to federal prison for 6 years with no parole. Because she went away, no one was paying on our house. The bank foreclosed on it and it was bought by someone else. So when she got out in 1992, she was homeless. Honestly, the majority of us didn't want to ruin her life like this. Had she toned down the excessive fines, we would have let her be. But she had to double down and steal from us because she didn't want to get a job like everyone else. HOA board campaign to do nothing, posted by Board Sandwich 176. I lived in a small 18-house neighborhood that had a deed-restricted HOA. We had a minimal common area along the main entry street that needed maintenance and some drainage infrastructure that needed to be maintained. Not much work had to be done at all. No one wanted to be on the board, so I ran for the board with the slogan, "I will do nothing more than is legally required to fulfill the legal requirements of the HOA." This slogan was enough to get 4 more neighbors to run with the same slogan. We had the typical committees, all with the same members and the same idea: leave everyone alone, fulfill our legal obligations, and move on. I was walking down the street one day and I was accosted by a neighbor who said, "You don't deserve to be president." I replied, "Yeah, you're right, I don't deserve it." This really set her off, so she started yelling at me about all the things I should be doing, planting a specific kind of flower, forcing her neighbors to do things unregulated by the HOA, and so on. So I invited her to run for president. I told her that she could submit a petition calling for a special election, and I could guarantee that everyone on the board would sign it and probably vote for her to take on the job. This, of course, just infuriated her. So she started writing letters to the board complaining about everything. We ignored the letters, which technically was a mistake. Our HOA documents required all letters to receive a response. She continued to send letters that had nothing to do with the HOA, so we crafted a malicious compliance response that read, "Thank you for your letter to the HOA board. After careful consideration, we have decided to ignore it." We then included instructions on how to call for a special election to have us kicked off the board and promised her the support of all the board members if she chose to circulate the required petition. She sold her house and moved. Our board continued with the same philosophy for the 12 years that I lived there. Nothing more than legally required, and leave everyone the heck alone. We would hold a homeowners meeting once a year, which was nothing more than a potluck dinner. We had to invite someone from the compliance company who worked for us to make sure we covered everything required for our annual meeting and reporting, and we would always have an agenda item under new business. Does everyone promise to be a reasonable adult? I've moved to a new 14-house neighborhood with an HOA. I haven't yet decided if I'll run for the board. The HOA illegally fines me, but I'm not even in the HOA. To find out what happens, click the video on your screen so you don't miss this crazy story, and I will see you there.